A Japanese parenting expert showed me a 5-second technique that instantly transformed my kids from children who ignored every request to children who took responsibility without being asked. I was skeptical because how could 5 seconds change behavior that months of nagging, consequences, and reward charts couldn't fix? But I tried it the very next morning, and within 3 days, my 6-year-old was cleaning up without reminders, and my 9-year-old was doing homework without the usual battle. By the end of 2 weeks, other parents were asking me what happened to my kids because the change was so noticeable. And once you understand why it works, you'll use it for everything. If you're exhausted from constantly reminding, nagging, and fighting to get your kids to be responsible, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this 5-second trick is going to change your entire dynamic starting today. Let me tell you exactly what this technique is, and then I'll explain the psychology behind why it works so powerfully. When you need your child to do something, instead of telling them what to do or asking them to do it, you pause for 5 seconds and simply state the situation as an observation. Then you wait silently while making gentle eye contact. That's it. 5 seconds of stating reality and waiting. Here's what it looks like in real life. My son's backpack was on the floor by the door where someone could trip over it. My old approach would have been saying, "Pick up your backpack," or asking, "Can you please move your backpack?" The Japanese ownership pause approach is different. No argument, no resistance, just action. The reason this works is brilliant, and it's rooted in how the human brain processes requests versus observations. When you tell a child what to do, even nicely, their brain registers it as an external command. This triggers resistance, especially in children who are developmentally driven to assert independence. Their automatic response is often to push back or ignore because complying feels like giving up control. But when you state an observation and pause, something completely different happens in their brain. You're not taking their power. You're actually giving them the power to solve the problem themselves. During that 5-second pause, the child's brain shifts from reactive mode to thinking mode. They look at the situation you've described, they recognize there's a problem or need, and they decide on their own to take action. The action becomes their choice, not your command. They follow through willingly, and they develop genuine responsibility. This is the foundation of intrinsic motivation. Development instead of against it. Let me give you more examples so you can see how versatile this technique is. Your daughter's shoes are in the middle of the living room. Instead of picking up your shoes, you say, "There are shoes in the middle of the room," and pause. Your son hasn't started his homework and it's almost bedtime. Instead of you needing to do your homework now, you say, "It's 7:30 and homework isn't done yet," and pause. Your child spilled juice on the counter. In each case, you're describing reality without blame, judgment, or command. Then the 5-second pause gives your child space to think and choose their response. Most of the time, they'll take the responsible action because you framed it as their problem to solve, not your order to resist. Now I need to be honest with you about something important. This technique doesn't work like magic 100% of the time, especially at first. They might look at you, be confused, or just go back to what they were doing. That's okay, and it's part of the process. Here's what you do when that happens. If your child doesn't respond after the 5-second pause, you add one more element. You ask a simple question that prompts problem solving. What do you think needs to happen here? Or what's your plan for handling this? You're still not commanding. You're guiding them to think through the situation and come up with their own solution. This is actually even more powerful than them just doing what you said, because now they're developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you think this would work with your child, or are you skeptical? I want to know what you're thinking. Here's what happened in my house over the first month of using the ownership pause consistently. The nagging stopped because I wasn't telling them what to do anymore. The resistance and arguing decreased dramatically because my kids felt like they were making choices instead of being controlled. But the most surprising change was how much more responsible they became overall. They started noticing messes and problems on their own and handling them without me saying anything. The technique was actually training them to be aware and take initiative. My daughter started making her bed without reminders. My son started putting his dishes in the sink after meals. These weren't things I was using the ownership pause for. There were spillover effects from developing the habit of noticing and taking responsibility. That's the real power of this approach. It's not just about getting compliance in the moment. It's about fundamentally shifting how your child relates to responsibility. The psychology behind this connects to something called locus of control. Children with an internal locus of control believe they have power over their choices and outcomes. They're more motivated, more resilient, and more responsible. Children with an external locus of control believe things happen to them, and they're just responding to outside forces. When we constantly tell children what to do, we're reinforcing external locus of control. When we use the ownership pause, we're building an internal locus of control. Now, let me share some important tips for using this technique effectively. First, your tone and body language matter enormously. You're not being sarcastic or passive-aggressive when you state the observation. You're being neutral and matter-of-fact. Think of yourself as a helpful narrator, not a frustrated authority figure. Second, the pause is crucial. Don't rush to fill the silence or repeat yourself. Give your child the full 5 seconds to process and respond. Trust the process. Third, this works best when you've already met your child's basic needs. A hungry, tired, or emotionally overwhelmed child isn't going to respond well to any technique. Make sure they're regulated first. Fourth, use this for age-appropriate expectations. A 2-year-old isn't going to respond the same way an 8-year-old will. Adjust your expectations based on the developmental stage. Fifth, and this is important, the ownership pause should be your primary approach, but not your only tool. There will be safety situations or time-sensitive moments where you need to be direct and commanding. That's okay. The ownership pause is for building responsibility in daily life situations, not for emergencies. Here's something I discovered that made this technique even more effective. I started combining it with appreciation rather than praise when my kids did take responsibility. Instead of saying good job for putting your backpack away, I'd say, I noticed you moved your backpack right away. That helps keep our entryway safe. I'm describing what I observed and the impact, not judging or evaluating them. This reinforces their internal motivation rather than making them dependent on my approval. The transformation I've seen in my kids over 6 months of consistently using the ownership pause has been remarkable. They're more aware of their surroundings, more considerate of others, and more willing to handle their responsibilities without being told. They've developed genuine accountability because they've been practicing making responsible choices hundreds of times. And our relationship has improved dramatically because I'm not the constant nag anymore. I'm their guide who trusts them to handle things. I also want to address what happens when kids genuinely can't figure out what to do. Sometimes the ownership pause reveals that your child doesn't actually know what the expectation is or how to handle the situation. That's valuable information. In those moments, instead of getting frustrated, you teach. You might say, when there's juice spilled, we want to wipe it up right away so it doesn't get sticky. Let me show you how. The next time, they'll know. The beauty of the ownership pause is that it's built on respect for your child's capability. You're assuming they can think, problem solve, and make good choices when given the opportunity. That assumption becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Children rise to meet our expectations and we create space for them to do so. If this 5-second technique resonates with you and you can see how it would reduce the daily battles in your home, please share this video with another parent who's stuck in the nagging cycle. This approach genuinely changes family dynamics when you commit to it. Drop a comment and tell me what situation you're going to try the ownership pause with first. Or if you've tried something similar, share how it went. I love hearing about real experiences. And make sure you're subscribed because we're building a community of parents who use psychology-backed techniques that respect children's development and actually create lasting change, not just quick fixes. Thank you for being here and for being willing to try something different. Your kids are capable of so much more than we often give them credit for. And this 5-second pause is how you unlock that responsibility.